what's going on and pretty much talking about the center and ignoring states and even your council. If you go out of the country, what you find is that a lot of things that people attend to are actually being done by the counties or local government administration and of course state. But it looks to me as if the governors know this too well to the extent that they hide under the cover and just get excited that everyone is talking about President Buhari or whoever is at that office at that point in time. But again, we're trying to bring the conversation and the discourse back to the states, those who are in charge and those who should be speaking to and asking questions of governance and developments. And Sulaiman, let welcome. And of course, as always, we have a lot of listeners who listen across the world. And if you're listening, don't forget to put the telephone area code +234. It's 0909-217-2973. And we're just doing the WhatsApp alone. I don't do forums. I've never liked it anyway. It's a material at this point in time. So we just do it so that we can actually coordinate and guide this. And today, my guest is someone who's not new in our polity, yes, in our faces, in our psyche, when it comes to numbers. And even, every time people talk about pensioners, there are a lot of people that should have a better understanding of what it is like to having a better understanding and management of that part of our life. Today we're excited to have one of the governorship candidates here in Lagos State. He's the candidate representing African Democratic Congress. He's an accomplished professional with a distinguished record spanning 3 decades and counting. Previously served as the pioneer MD, CEO of ARM Pension Managers, and of course the MD CEO of Pensioners Alliance Limited. You must have heard of Power Pensions, 2 leading Nigeria's foremost pension fund management companies. So with diverse countrywide teams overseeing 2 portfolios of assets. And also he served as pioneer chairman of the Pension Fund Operators Association, that's a panel, the umbrella body of licensed pension fund managers and custodians in Nigeria. The list goes on. And of course, he holds a master's in business administration from Harvard University and a BSc in accounting from the University of Lagos. Join us as welcome, Funso Doherty. Good to see you and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm more excited that you're here. It's really an exciting thing when people talk about governance and people talk about, when you leave your core profession to now say, wait a minute, I think I can do it. I know what's missing. I know why I should go in there. That's the whole essence. And I'm happy that the conversation is ongoing for Nigerians and Lagosians. As many would want to ask, let's start by asking you, why are you running for governorship of Lagos State?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. I think that first, I, like many Nigerians and Lagosians, understand that the reason why we're where we are, where we're not at the level of development that we desire, why our quality of life for most citizens is not where it ought to be for a nation with our endowments, is really all down to a failure of leadership over the years. And in a democratic setting, the only way you address the failure of leadership is if you have people who have the character and the competence for governance, stepping up to offer themselves for service, and the people support such candidates into office. So as we look at the dividends or lack thereof of democracy for our citizens, and we ask ourselves what has essentially been the reason why, and how do we fix it going forward, I'm of the view that we need more candidates who again can bring that character of governance to step up, and not just me, others like myself as well, to give the electorate and the people a broader menu to choose from than what they've had over the years. And that when we do that, we strengthen our democracy, and that's how we get to the promised land of good governance, which is ultimately what will deliver the quality of life that our people want. And so this primarily for me is the motivation. Having spent 3 decades in the private sector, and achieved good success in the private sector, having managed 3 companies as MD CEO, it's not unusual, as you know, in other climes, for people who have achieved success in the private sector at a stage in their lives to move into offering themselves for public service. And that essentially is what I'm doing.
I think the catchword for me there is offering yourself for public service, and I get a sense of what that means. It was only recently I was having a conversation with a notable Lagos-based lawyer, Libera Soshoma, and he said, well, people don't open up to conversations, and which is what you're doing. And I picked up 3 key things here. You're looking at leadership. You're also talking about the people's support, and in all of that, you ended up by saying we should be talking about how we can fix what's broken. Let's first talk about leadership. This is Lagos, and I just want to see how much of time we can get, because I don't want to go talking about your life as administrator of the pension companies, but some would say Lagos is already working. Oh, why do you want to run? We just saw a governor of an opposition, People's Democratic Party, Yeson Wike. He came to Lagos, and knowing full well that his own party has a candidate in Lagos, he threw it all out and said, well, he doesn't think that anyone should run against the incumbent, even at the detriment of his own political party. So for some listening to you today, let's talk about those things you think Lagosians should get better, that they're not getting at the moment.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Well, I don't want to comment on the question of Nyson Wike and the PDP. There are all sorts of reasons why people do things politically, as you know. So many things could have motivated that comment. But I think, despite the propaganda, and I will call it propaganda, that Lagos is working, I think if you examine the objective methods and you assess Lagos in the way in which it or organization should be assessed, which is, how have you done in relation to the resources that you employ as the leader of that state? I think if you measure it by that sort of a little bit more sophisticated measurement, you will see that actually Lagos, rather than being a leader, is probably a laggard when you measure it. And I will give you concrete.
That's in relation with the resources that Lagos is.
In relation to the resources that Lagos is blessed with.
Yeah.
Because, and I will give you concrete, sort of reasons why I say so. It's almost like the parable of the talents, right? In the biblical parable of the talents, right? Where the function of how well you do is a function of what you've been given. So the man who was given 10 talents did not measure himself against the man who was, or should not measure himself against the man who was given 5 talents. Lagos, as you know, is a commercial city that's had a commercial core for centuries, actually. And it's been a center of commerce. It's been a capital for many years. So the present administration in Lagos, which is about 25 years old, was actually bequeathed, a substantial base, right? And it is that base that we should be measuring. What have they done over the 25 years? So that this does not appear as if it's, my own assessment, which some might argue may be politically motivated. I don't know if you saw recently that the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is a unit of the Economist magazine, they do an annual ranking of cities across the world. They ranked 172 cities across the globe. Lagos was ranked 171 out of 172. In other words, the worst but one. Right? This is not Funso Doherty's or Suleiman's assessment. It is an objective assessment of cities, right? And so when you think that a city has been governed by one ruling entity for 25 years, And at the end of that period, this is the assessment that is made. It is very clear that even though you might compare yourself to X, Y, and Z city in Nigeria and say, I'm doing better than them, when we compare you to other cities across the globe, we're not doing well. And what does this metric measure? It measures the outcome of governance in terms of quality of life. There are 5 areas that it looks at: infrastructure, health, education, culture and environment, and stability. And measures about 30 different criteria under these 5 measures. So you can imagine it's a very comprehensive report card.
Yeah.
And it tells you basically what it's seeking to do. If you go and look at the index, it's telling you what quality of life do the citizens of these cities enjoy compared to other cities across the world. So I think it's quite clear. Lagos could be far better than it is. And I can go into the different areas where I think that is. But this is the motivation. And I think we should not continue to be satisfied with mediocrity. I think people should not get used to 6 hours, 5 hours of traffic, health systems that don't work, education that don't produce quality outcomes. People should not get used to it and think that that's how it should be. That is not how it should be.
The thing here is first awareness. You spoke about the Economist, which is one of the most objective, analysis, no doubt. It's not tainted, it's not influenced by anyone. And every now and then, when we talk about having a smart city, by the way, I need to bring this. I like to paint a picture of people and put faces. About 2 months ago, a young lad fell into the well. He was ill. He was going to fetch water, and he fell. It made news, and I said, "This is happening in Lagos." It then means that potable water is still far from getting to the people. And for some, I've also asked the same question of some government people that have been here. If highbrow Lekki, just behind us here, can't boast of having potable water, cars go corroded or into the kind of water, then we should be talking and asking questions. Now, you said infrastructure, which is very, very resounding. A lot of people will be waiting to hear what the ADC, and in this case, Funso Doherty, has in terms, because I want to put in this side by side, since we already said that we'll be looking at how we can fix it.
Yep.
So let's bring in the how here. I know we'll still take comments. I see some comments coming in already. We'll take comments. But again, the how, for instance, infrastructure. I live in Lagos, you live in Lagos. To a large extent, an average Lagosian will say Lagos is working. But now you just painted the picture and you took us back to that report card, which shouldn't excite any Lagosian. Knowing full well that Cairo was there. I think that's the South Africa was also there. A few other cities were also in that report, I remember. So what can we do to rejig Lagos if Lagos is a headache at the moment?
Yeah, there's so much to say in answer to that question, and I'm not sure we have all the time in the world to do it. But I would take, first of all, I am not sure I would agree with you that the average Lagosian would say that Lagos is working. Actually, my experience has been the opposite. Many of the elite may have that view because they can create circumstances for themselves. But even there, right, many of those will also tell you it's not working. We go around. Yesterday, I was in 2 local governments, Shomolu and Koshofle.
Oh, you started going around?
Oh yeah, sure. Talking with, and we have been for a while. Talking with the people, and I have lists from each local government that people talk about, and you'll be surprised how consistent those lists are. People know that Lagos is not. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them that Lagos is. They know in terms of the quality of life, what the day-to-day looks like, what their experiences, what their children experience, what their families experience. People know that it's not working for them. It may be working for a few, but it is not working for most. Now, if you look, in answer to your question, there's so much to talk about. First of all, if you take the infrastructure, and infrastructure, as you know, has many dimensions. There's the transportation transportation infrastructure. There's power, there's water, there's waste, right? Let's just take transportation, which is a big issue in Lagos, right? Many people, as you know, in Lagos spend hours upon hours commuting every day. Some people spend 5 hours every day commuting back and forth to work. Think about what that does to an individual's quality of life. But it's not just time and inconvenience. With commute, and this, by the way, is one of the highest commute times objectively measured in the world. Now, commute times comes with it other things that you don't see. So air quality, health outcomes, these are all have been studied to be closely associated with commute times. So there's a real human cost that we're not even counting associated with this. There are some things, quick wins that one can do in Lagos with respect to transportation infrastructure, but there are also longer term measures that one can introduce. Lagos, as you know, is a coastal city. Not just is it a coastal city, but we also have the lagoon, which runs pretty much across the state. This is something that can be used as a veritable tool for addressing the transportation infrastructure. We can do a lot more with the use of the waterways, as other similarly geographically endowed cities have done to manage their commutes, right? So if you pick a few key routes and just ensure that we have robust, safe vessels that people feel comfortable going on those routes, that will do a lot. If you think about, say, a route like Ikorodu to Victoria Island, for example, we amaze the number of people who come on that route to work and back every day. And you know, there's a waterway that can accomplish that quite easily. And there's some boats on there already. Many people do not feel comfortable going on those vessels. And we can do a lot more to make it a more robust service that people feel comfortable. I have lived in a coastal city, in a more developed society. And similar to Lagos in many ways. And in the office where I worked, some people came by ferry, some people came by rail, some people came by road. And it didn't depend on how much you earned, it just depended on what was most comfortable for you. And I think Lagos can be there. If you think about rail, we have had basically one axis of rail travel being built by this administration for almost 15 years, and we have not delivered it. Other cities have done similar things, much bigger projects, delivered them, moved on to other things, and built out the infrastructure. We have to ask the question, what is the reason why it's taking so long? What is the transparency and accountability around this project? Why has it not been delivered? Who has been taken to task? What actions have we taken? Right? I can go on and on, but I want to relate it to a fundamental thing which I think Lagos needs. And that is the reform of government and the reform of the way in which government operates. I think that many of the decisions that you will see and many of the challenges to quality of life that you will see for our people, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's education, whether it's health, etc., stems from the fact that the decisions being taken by those in authority are not necessarily being taken in the full interest of the people at heart. And I think we don't have sufficient accountability, we don't have sufficient transparency around the operations of government. And that leaves a lot of room for self-interest, for self-dealing, for corrupt actions by public officials, for actions that are self-serving, etc. And I think that fundamentally, that is the foundation that we have to lay in fixing all of these things. And I can talk a lot more about that.
The thing there is, it looks to me as if sometimes these are deliberately done. Because listening to you now talking about, you qualified at the well endowed, talking about waters, and we've not been able, we Lagosians have not been able to harness the ultimate good from that. And you put that side by side with what we've seen in other parts of the world and what they've done with this. And you also say you've been going around, and the vibe you get from the average Lagosian is quite different. Do they, because I would presume that you've asked them, have they ever also voiced out, do they have the knowledge and representatives to also, take their pain to those in authority? Because sometimes when the D-Day comes, I look to seeing you in a debate with those that have been, or those that were the incumbent.
Sure.
And perhaps they say, well, the people haven't said this to us, or we don't know that this is what is happening.
Yeah.
Do they relay some of these complaints to the government or the representatives that they have at the moment?
So there are a couple of aspects to that. First, yes, I believe that they do. But sometimes when you're in leadership, you hear what you want to hear, and different people tell you.
I was coming there.
Yes. And so at the same time, people are telling you that things are not working. You will have some people around you who will be telling you that you're doing well, right? But I can tell you that the vast majority of people, and remember, these are not the average negotiator. Is not an elite. Is not somebody who has so much voice in the public space, right? They are basically trying to make ends meet, right? And so they voice their concerns in the way in which they know how to voice them. But many of them feel powerless. You see what I mean? So part of what we are doing, for example, and this is why I'm excited about 2023, is that people are increasingly understanding that where their voice is loudest is in their vote. And they have not focused sufficiently on that in the past. But I can tell you, as I go from local government to local government, I'm seeing that this is changing, and that 2023 will be different. And we are seeing an increased fervor. There was a woman in an engagement in Koshofe yesterday. She was at a voter registration station from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. She's 75 years old. But she was insistent that she was going to get her voters card. She was insistent. I think people are getting to that point where, and because a lot of things have happened since the last election, NSAS, Sorosoki, all of those things. And we are seeing it play out. In my estate the other day, they organized a registration drive. 2,000 people showed up the first day. They were there from morning till night. They said, go home, we'll continue tomorrow. More people showed up the next day. Right? So people are understanding that their voice is loudest in their vote. Now, as you may know, in the last election in Lagos, this administration actually, even though again there's propaganda of a dominant party, this administration was actually elected by a narrow minority of the electorate. What do I mean? The present governor was elected with 700,000 votes in a state that has almost 7 million registered voters with PVCs, right? That tells you that most of the electorate was not there on election day, right? So it's almost like they won. If you're going to use a football analogy, it's probably like they won by walkover, right? Because the opponents did not show up.
Those are phrases politicians lose. I wonder if any politician. But again, sorry, I don't mean to cut you, because once it's about politics and it's about governance, I like to let people do the talking, and that's why I'm keen to listen to you. But in between, we'll be bringing some of the comments, and Lolade is saying, ask Funso Doherty, in terms of the report of EIU, how does it turn around Lagos in terms of infrastructure, health, education, culture, and environment, and stability? I think you started already, and whether he or she goes on to say, just summary, one by one, and please, what can the action plan he has for us as Ikoroduan? I'm just hearing that's a new one. Just like I always tell people, I say I'm an Ikpajian, for the IPJ people, we have to make, some of these people, belong. And that's one of the key things. I'm happy that you just told us that you've gone around and you had that conversation. And Lolade said, if he truly wants to convince me, he should tell us the plan he has for us. Let's talk about the plans. People in Ikorodu, I had a representative here, I think it should be about a fortnight ago. He's representing one of those constituencies in Ikorodu. And the questions were also about the waterways. We had him here on the things. So it tells you that the people in Lagos, they understand their problems, they understand the concerns, and they also know, they have a sense of a solution to some of these things. How is it so difficult if the man or the woman who feels the pain, whether you're highly or educated or not, has a sense of a solution? Why is it so difficult for government to have say?
So there are two things in solving a problem. One is knowing what to do. The other is having the will and the political will to do it, right? And often you'll find that the actions of government are divorced from the needs of the people. A lot of the time because of self-interest. You see what I mean? So what projects the government pursues, how it pursues it, should be driven by what the needs of the people are. But if it's being driven more by the interests of a narrower minority, you may undertake the wrong projects. You may do things that are geared towards the minority that you are beholden to, as opposed to the broader electorate that has those needs that you need to fix, right? And I think this is fundamental. It's actually fundamental to Lagos's problem. And when I talk about government reform being the foundation of what we're doing, this is what we're saying. What does this mean? First of all, we will reform government such that the average government worker is reasonably compensated. Okay?
They just got a raise.
You ask, yeah, they got a raise. They got 25%. 25% of. First of all, the question you ask yourself: why did that raise happen on the eve of the election? All right? Is it that people have not been working? Right? So you have to ask yourself the motivation behind that raise. Secondly, you have to ask yourself. You see, the objective is not to give people a particular raise of 25% so that they can. The question is, what are they earning? And is that compensation reasonable? Maybe what they need is 100%. Do you understand? And you then have to get a path to get it down so that people are earning a reasonable compensation. Now, this compensation is just a starting point. Where we are going is to say that you have to institute integrity, accountability, transparency in the actions of every serving public officer in Lagos State. I will strengthen the Attorney General's office. I will strengthen the tools of surveillance within government. I will strengthen the tools of audit within government, and I will strengthen the tools of enforcement. And we will do this from the governor's level all the way through the system. We will abide by the rules that we expect our people to abide by, and we will lead by example, and we will hold ourselves to those standards. And we will insist that people do it, and we will insist on integrity. Where people do not, we will prosecute them. And we will clean up the public sector. And what this will do, even though we might look at this as an academic and say, can it be done, and so on and so on, it can certainly be done. In the best of private sector organizations, it's done. There's no reason why it can't be done. Now, when you do this, what happens? You begin to align the actions of these officers of government with the interests of the people. You see what I mean? Because those actions are no longer being driven by self-interest. They are being driven by what the needs of the people are. And over time, you improve governance, right? And so the decisions that are then taken, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in health, whether it's in education, all of these then fall into line with what the people need and in line with what the people expect. So if you take the lady who is calling me from the specific things. First, I've talked about government reform, and these are specific actions, and I will do them. Second is if you take education, for example, there are a few key things that are needed. One, you reform the curriculum. You need to review the curriculum and bring it into a modern curriculum for what's needed for a mega city like Lagos, and in the modern environment and society in which we live, because as a people, we will compete globally. And so we have to be preparing our kids to compete globally. The teacher quality must also be addressed. Then we need to expand vocational options, because in a society like ours, we need to give people more options. Not everybody will have a desk job, and we need to give people the tools to create employment. And then we need to support our small and medium-scale businesses to assimilate people who are coming out with a vast range of skills.
Sorry to cut you there, but I hope you don't lose your train of thought, because now you're talking about vocational, training. It's very instructive because we woke up and it suddenly disappeared. I have someone who lived very close to me then. I always say I'm one of those who live in the hinterlands of Lagos. And I woke up someday and I didn't see him anymore. And someday my phone rang and he said he was calling me from Dubai. He never went to formal schools, but he went to Dubai to actually enhance his knowledge. And you wouldn't believe it. Once he came on holiday and someone had problems with his car, sometimes you have just one problem and you take it down and you have 10, other problems. And over the phone, this young guy who never went to any formal school, from the vocational training he got in UAE, he was able to put everyone through the process to fixing the man's car. So it shows the importance of what you're saying.
Yeah,
Vocational,
absolutely.
yes. And I want us to appreciate on that because I'm excited about that. And almost everyone feels that I must go to school like Funso Doherty, I must go to school like the next man. But you can actually go by having education for self-reliance.
Yes, and it's very true. The educational system constitutionally provides actually for free and compulsory education up to a certain level, and in Lagos we have that at junior secondary level actually. But more broadly, this vocational option I think is very key, right? Particularly for a city like Lagos, because we need to give people a range of options. There's no point sending people through educational systems, one that they can up through university, and then they come out and then for years, they're not. And some of them, they're not even gifted that way. They are gifted in other ways, and we have to be able to develop people across. Now, it's also important because these are the skills actually that enable people ultimately, and if you look at other cities across, like similar cities, that enable people to establish small businesses. And those businesses will employ 1, 2, 3, 4 people, either through an apprentice system or what have you. And this is an engine of job creation. As you know, a city like Lagos can only be built on a foundation where it's constantly creating jobs, right? So this is one of the pillars of that. So as you can see, these are 2 pillars of our policy platform that are interrelated and that work with one another. Related to this, right, is the question of it's related to the government reform question, which I talked about, but it's also related to the idea of supporting small and medium-scale businesses, which I spoke about. One of the problems that we have in Lagos, which is a big problem, is that some of these small businesses, rather than being supported by government, right, are being harassed and almost view government as the opposition rather than as a supportive entity, right? Because people establish businesses within a week or two. There are several government agencies, coming to request one thing or the other, right? And people feel almost persecuted by some of these government agencies. Part of the reason why that is happening is because the officers within those agencies, rather than see themselves as a tool of government to support the businesses, view that seat as a place or a means to extract rents and to extort money or resources from the people that they regulate. And some of these resources, not that they're trying to raise money for government. A lot of those monies sometimes end up in private pockets, right? So again, you can see this area where this whole notion of government reform of government agencies, support of small businesses, reduce the regulatory burden on those businesses so they can be successful, the educational system, the vocational options to support them to create job creation. All of these are integrated in a way, ultimately, that you build a prosperous society that spreads wealth across the economy, which is what Lagos needs. One of the tragedies of the last 25 years is that we've blown through tremendous resources as a state. But the outcome of it has been largely concentrated in a small group of populace, a small segment of the society. And the wider society has not experienced meaningful growth. in terms of the opportunities, in terms of the quality of life, in terms of the living standards of most of the population. And that must change. This year alone, Lagos's budget is about 1.7 trillion. Lagos has tremendous resources when you compare to other states. We have to, as a government, and my government will manage those resources better. We will ensure that the resources of Lagos drive prosperity for the broader citizens of Lagos, rather than managing the government in such a way that resources get concentrated in a few pockets over time. And in a generation, in one generation, we can move Lagos into the first world. That's our view.
Let me quickly check some of these messages so that we can actually. This one here is from Osakwe. Osakwe is listening. It's from Benin City, Edo State, and he says, more importantly, there's need for research on accountability. It's pretty long, so I'm just trying to take. Yes, I always insist to keep it short and simple. More importantly, there's need for research on accountability and money for value projects. What comes to the coffers monthly from all sources, and what has such resources delivered against the campaign promises made? He's asking questions, not to you, just like a rhetorical question, looking at some of the key things you said about Lagos in relation to what it gets money-wise. No less than 80% of the governors are plutocrats. That's from Osakwe in Benin. And this one here from Achi. Achi says, Funso Doherty is sound, very intelligent, and he knows the challenges of Lagos. Unfortunately, we vote party, not individuals. In that case, you know more than I do. May God help us. From Achi. Achi, I don't know. What I know is that Funso Doherty is the governorship candidate of African Democratic Congress, and he says he's got the pin code to unlocking, a better Lagos. And this other one here says, Lawrence, I think I'm losing this. Okay. Oh, this looks like a book. You wrote me a book. What's his name? I'll paraphrase. Let's see. I hope, okay, Akin Lagos, let's see if we can take this. I don't want to be too pacey when I read your messages. And he says that, to be candid, our people and government are all interested in competing and contesting for the spoils of office without the outright interests of the people at heart. I've lived my entire life in Lagos and things worked. Jakonde spent barely 4 years, and believe me, successive governments after him combined haven't even scratched Latif Jakonde's 20%. There was functional transportation, healthcare, qualitative education, and people lived normal lives, as against now with pseudo-governments within a main government. The civil service was functional and did all the work, and not now when contracts outsourced to friends and cohorts of political office holders. A functional and not a weakened civil service is key to an all-round optimal performance for this state. Jakonde's blueprints are still available and can be upgraded and implemented. Akin, you have to give it to me. I read everything.
And I agree with you, Akin.
Anyway, this one here is from Pat. Pat says, hello, Sulai. Thanks for bringing Funso Doherty to the show. It's good asking him how to fix Lagos, but more importantly, the how rests with civil servants in the state. Yes, I want him to talk on that. The bureaucracy in these ministries can be major issues. Local government contributes negatively to the issue in Lagos. Typically, fixing of pothole on major roads, which primarily is a function of local government, but everything is left to the ministry, and this does not happen, thereby making life difficult for an average Lagosian. Let's just pause and let Funso take some of those comments and questions and address them.
Okay, I'll take the most recent one. I've spoken about that case.
Yes.
I agree with his comments. But I think the latter question, I think, is a very good one. It's almost like, again, what are you solving for as a state administrator? In your intro to this show, we talked about how there's a lot of focus on the center, a lot of focus on the presidency. In a similar way, there's a similar thing going on in the states, right? There's a lot of focus at the state level and on the governorship, and they have that is not it's intentional, right? Because the governors generally want to control all the resources in the center of the states in order to make all the rules. And remember that state elections are run by the state electoral commissions, not the INEC. So there's a LASIEC, for example, which runs local government elections. So in many ways, the outcomes of those elections historically have been determined by the state administrations, right? That is whoever's running the state, typically the government, right? And what historically people have done, if you follow the thread of self-serving government, right, and how it will function, what they've done is to put, basically they put a premium on loyalty over competence. So you are more interested in who's sitting in that local government seat, who is going to essentially be loyal to you, rather than rather than paying more focus on who should be occupying that seat, right, and who has the capacity and the competence to run a government, because the local government is a government. It is a government. So you have to have somebody who has governance ability, who has character, who has competence. And then when you have somebody like that, you can empower them. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
To take the decisions that they need to take at a local level. You cannot you cannot sit in a Lausa. You cannot know everything about what the guys in the corridor need. You cannot. But what you can do as somebody who is running any nation, state, organization of size is to ensure that you put the right capacity in place, in the right place, to solve for the right question. And that right question is, what do the people need, and how best do we serve the needs of the people? And if you put the right people in there, it's not about loyalty, it's not about sustaining yourself in power. The gentleman talked about Atiku Abubakar being there for 4 years. If you're interested in doing the best you can in 4 years, you will put the best people to do the work. But if you're interested in sustaining yourself for 8 years, and then after you go after 8 years, continue to call the shots behind the scene for whoever is coming, then you are going to solve for that. You're going to accumulate whatever resources you can, put the right people who will support that view, etc., etc. So I think that we just have to follow the thread, right, of good governance. There's good governance on one side, there's self-serving governance on the other, and we just have to choose the one we want.
Well, this is from Leo. Leo is saying hello, Funso and Sulai. Lagos is not working under APC because a party that could not build fourth mainland bridge and provide potable water for Lagosians. He goes on to say the development in Cape Town in South Africa will tell you that Lagos is not working. And this one here says, there's no name on this. Hello, Sulai, about demolished buildings. Did we talk about demolished buildings? About demolished buildings, is it true those land properties are not given back to the owners? Oh, you're asking me a question. Well, I'm afraid I'm not in a better place to answer that until I do my findings. Honestly, I can't speak off the cuff. Thanks for listening and sending a message. Just listen, and we have the ADC governorship candidate of Lagos State here, Funso Doherty. I was going to ask you, who is a Lagosian?
Very good question. So Lagos, as you know, is a city with a long history. And, we are also a mega city, we're a cosmopolitan city. Lagosian is anybody who lives in Lagos and identifies with Lagos. Basically lives here, raises his family here. We consider that person a Lagosian. Now, you may not be an indigene of Lagos, but you're a Lagosian. Right? Lagos itself, right? Many of the people who think of themselves as Omoikos, themselves were settlers in Lagos, if you go and trace their ancestry. But they settled maybe 200 years ago. You see what I mean? Some came from Sierra Leone, some, there's the Brazilian part. If you go to, that's Lagos. We're cosmopolitan, and we are proud of it. We are proud of our diversity, right? I, as Doherty, we have our own particular history in Lagos, and we're very proud of it, right? So we give recognition to the what you might think of as the indigenous people, and some of the people you think of as indigenous are people whose settlement history is just centuries old, rather than people who are more recent. We give recognition and respect to those who have been here for centuries, but we also give recognition to those who have become Lagosians almost by virtue of living here, contributing to this society, paying taxes here. even though they may in their lifetimes have been born in other states, spent much of their life in other states, and then just lived here for some part of their lives. You see, Lagos is a modern cosmopolitan mega city. That is the future of Lagos. Our future lies not in sort of holding on to some historical concept of who a Lagosian is.
So off the top of my head, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you can land. Sorry.
You see, if you go to New York today and then you ask yourself, who is the traditional New Yorker? Or you go to London and you say, who is a Londoner? Do you see what I mean? These are modern mega cities, and there's a new way you define yourself as a city going forward, which says that look, we're a diverse society, we're a welcoming society. What is most important is that those who are here should be law-abiding, should be contributing to society, and should be making us greater as a result of our collective engagement with one another.
Speaking of collective engagement, one of the key things that perhaps, I don't know if you've started thinking of that, you and your team, and it has to do with the many busy bodies in Lagos. Now, you spoke about New York, London, and a few other places, and it's amazing that many Nigerians who have traveled outside the country would attest to the fact that we have a lot of busybodies here in Lagos. For instance, our transportation business. How are you going to fix transportation business without having agberos and all the busybodies, number one? How would you fix our markets? I've never liked markets growing up, especially when it does rain. Growing up then, back in the day, what they call poto yama rubbish. It makes me sick. So I keep asking myself, well, we see Nigerians, you go outside the country, you want to take pictures in parks, bus stations. You want to take pictures in the market. But that is even in flea markets, you want to take pictures there, but you can't do that because we still have busybodies, even though people collect monies on a daily basis. And I say, will Lagos ever look to what we see outside the country?
It's a process to get there, right? So it's not something that's going to happen today, tomorrow, or what have you, right? But if you have a plan to move the city to a mega city status that it should occupy, look, we are of the view that you can move Lagos into the first world in a generation. We say a generation because, and a generation might seem like a very long time, but remember that this present administration has been in place for about 24 years. A generation is defined as 30 years. So it's more or less a generation that will spread. We think in the next generation, Lagos can be transformed. Now, your question, which relates to agberos, and there's almost no forum, and I told you I've gone from local government to local government. There's no forum I have gone to where people have not raised the question of agberos.
Oh.
There's none.
I thought I was the only one.
There's no forum I've gone to. We discussed it at length yesterday. Now, you see, this notion of agberos, I think what people have to realize, and I'm not going to sugarcoat these comments, what people have to realize is that the agberos are part of the power structure of the existing administration. I stand to be quoted on that. They are part of the power structure of the current administration. The current administration relies on, because at the end of the day, these are folks who cast themselves as a union and as appendages of a union who are supposed to be representing our road transport workers and so on. Who, by the way, many of whom are victims of this so-called leadership of those unions because they are almost extorted on a daily basis by those people. See, those guys deliver political favors to the ruling party. The ruling party often rides to power on the support of those entities. And so there's a very cozy relationship between the ruling entity and those, what I call agents of disorder on our streets. If you go on the streets and you look at some of them, they wear tunics.
Yeah.
If you look at it, you will see Lagos State insignia on it, in many cases, right? I'm not saying that the state printed those things and gave to them, but they feel empowered enough to wear those things and nobody's going to challenge them. You see what I mean? So we have to break that. And this is a core part of our own message to people. that, look, the way you break that is very simple. It is the people that break it. Because what happens is that when the people look at the options that they are presented with on the ballot for the governorship of Lagos in March of next year, you have to ask yourself, who are we going to get behind? Who is going to go there and represent us and the things that we care about, and has the character and has the track record that we can see what he's done, that he's led with integrity. We can ask people who have worked with him, what is this man like? Right? That when he gets there, he will work in our interest. Because if we, as a broader people, don't do that, what happens is that the Agberos gather themselves together. They vote in, because they vote in the ruling party as a minority. Remember, I said 700,000 votes. Then the majority of people stay away. And so who is the ruling party going to be concerned with? Who are they going to kowtow to? Who are they going to be beholden to? It is those guys. So when you see those things playing out on the streets, there's no smoke without fire. Those guys are part of the power structure of Lagos.
Well, I have so many messages, and this is speaking to those listeners. You will pardon me if I can't take yours. We have a flurry of messages here. Let's quickly take some more. Hello, Sulai, and thanks for getting Mr. Doherty on. He's clearly very sound and wants to serve. May I ask what he will do with all the wonderful ideas and plans he has if he and his party, the ADC, I'm jumping lines, doesn't win the governorship elections. One of the problems we have as a people is thinking we can't make a difference unless we're holding the reins. From what I see, sometimes you're officially the head, but really a puppet being pulled by the puppet master. This is from Dr. I don't know how to pronounce that, S-Y-E, maybe that's an initial, or Sheg or Shay. And this one here says, hi, Sulai and Funso. Sir, can you please explain how to solve the issue of Agbero and Lasma with Omonile? We just spoke about that, and I'm happy that your message is coming after he just answered that. I didn't see this before. And this one here says, Suleiman and Funso, let's be frank with ourselves. We can't compare Lagos of 1999 to present time of 2023 in terms of infrastructures and development. He, Funso, needs to let us know what he can do to improve in terms of development. This is Rotimi and Kia de Paul. And I think we still, well, an hour is too short sometimes, but time flies. Let's see if you can take this quickly before we wrap up, Funso.
Okay, thank you. So there was a question which, and I picked up a word, puppet, in that question, which I'll just quickly, since we're running out of time, address that part of it. Look, see, you have to ask yourself when you go out to vote on March of next year, the candidates you are being presented with, are you being presented with the decision makers, or are you being presented with people who are representing the decision makers? And it's an important question to ask. And I think that that's part of the issue that we've had in Lagos, where even though we've had elections every 4 years, in truth, the decision making, the nexus of decision making in the state has not changed, right? The decisions are still flowing from the same spot. And I think that needs to change. There's no organization, state, nation in this world that has an entrenched leadership for that length of time that produces good outcomes without checks and balances. There is none. And that needs to change. And what I can say is that as you hear me speaking today, this is how you're going to hear me speaking in Alausa, and you know, looking into my eyes, that this is the gentleman who is running the state, at least from an executive perspective. You have to work with the legislature, but in terms of who's in charge of the executive, you will not be in doubt. The second point I would address again very quickly is that yes, I agree that in many ways we've seen a decline in infrastructure, in the quality of life from 99. Even though there are some we've built new roads, we've built like Lekki Bridge and so on and so forth. But if you ask people, what is the quality of their life today in relation to what it was? For the average Nigerian, average Lagosian, which I keep talking about, which is the majority of Lagosians, their life is more difficult today. They are not as wealthy in terms of day-to-day standards of living. Things are more costly. The things they can afford are fewer. They're spending more time in traffic, right? So there's a lot to say that in this generation, in many ways, we have underperformed significantly in the generation. We could have been much further ahead of where we are, having spent a generation. And we should not, and this is my own view, we should not make the mistake of investing another generation in the same vehicle, hoping for a different outcome.
Well, it's a fine one we'll be having. Quickly, I need to acknowledge this, and this is coming from Edafe Soje. Edafe Soje is listening to us live from Atlanta in the state of Georgia, by the way. And talking about the elections in that part of the world, I'd like to quickly, before we wrap up, mention some Nigerians who are going into the midterm elections, especially in the state of Georgia. We have Oye Owolabi, Shegun Adeino, and of course we also have Gabriel Koye. Plenty of Nigerians. If you have Nigerians doing well outside the shores of the country, what stops us from getting those here? Quickly here, let's close on this. You're looking to a debate, because once I recall, my colleagues and I back then on television, a particular governor didn't like the fact that we're saying that every governor should come for a debate. That was when we realized that many, this thing that they do in school back then, you're going for student union positions, they won't let you say anything. You just go with one verbose English, lobotomy of the, hey, you don't win. So they don't let you talk. So are you looking to have a debate?
I'm actually looking forward to those debates, because I think we'll have a robust dialogue. And, when the English gets too tough, we'll move to Pidgin. And then now Lagos we do now, so we can mix it up.
I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy you made it. And for all those contesting, the discourse is open to everyone, and we're still looking forward. The campaigns are still on, so we're looking forward to having Funso Doherty in the days to come. And we're also saying that people should keep it issues based. Have a conversation, or a robust conversation with anyone or everyone you so desire, so that we can know those who will fix our cities, our towns, and our country. My guest has been Funso Doherty. He's the African Democratic Congress, that's the ADC governorship candidate for Lagos State, and he's been here on the discussion. So once again, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Sulaiman, and of course you can catch up with the discourse on our YouTube channel, and of course on our frequency here. Thank you, and bye-bye.